Hello, everyone. How are you all doing today? I hope you are doing great. Today, we are going to talk about data analysis tools for quantitative methods. Now, I know this topic can be a bit challenging since the first time, as always, a student would hear about the discussions about the different statistical tools or the different data analysis tools, especially for quantitative method. Um, it's it's always it has always been a feedback that it's hard to retain the concepts or to retain the the topic, no, or the concepts in this topic. So what I did is I prepared this video discussion for you. That way you can watch it at your own pace after this discussion and review it as many times as you need. So in that way, as you will repeatedly listen to the discussion, you will get a good grasp of what we are going to discuss right now. No, so again, our discussion today will be all about data analysis tools for quantitative methods. No, a super important foundation for understanding how we work with numbers and make sense of your research data. Okay, so let's start with something basic but super important. Okay, the types of data. So, why is it important? Knowing what kind of data we are working with will help us choose the right tools and the right analysis later on, no, after we have gathered the data. So I'm pretty sure I have already mentioned this in the class that each statistical tool requires a specific data, no, a specific data, and there are certain requirements in using a certain statistical tool. So, and one of the considerations is the type of data that the researcher was able to gather. So we will be breaking it down into two big groups yung data na nakukuha natin sa research. We have the scale, okay, or it could come out as measurements or counts. Then we also have categorical data. Yeah, so apil na dito yung mga yung sa questionnaires na ginagamit, no. But of course, first, let's talk about variable. If you look at this diagram on the slide, okay, of course, you'll see that everything starts with the big word variable. So again, what's a variable? I hope this has, you were able to retain, no, the definition of a variable. So again, a variable is anything that we can measure or record in research that can change or vary. So again, from the word variable, or anything that can vary, but and anything that can be measured. So this could be someone's age, gender, exam score, or level of satisfaction, level of motivation. No, so that's it. No, that's variable. So from here, variables are split into two major types based on how the data behaves. So as you can see, we have this under the var under var a variable under the variable is we have scale and categorical. No, so a variable can be categorized according to scale or categorical. So when we say scale, again, these are numerical variables. So they deal with numbers you can measure or count. So under scale variables, we have two kinds: continuous and the discrete. Okay, continuous and the discrete. So these are numbers that, when we talk about continuous variables, these are numbers that can take any value within a range, including decimals and fractions. So you typically measure these with tools like a ruler, stopwatch, or thermometer, or even kanang grades, no? Grades or scores. Okay. So when we talk about continuous data, this is great for finding averages, and also kung since it can elicit, or it can generate average or mean, then it is best for running correlations and other statistical tests, no, because it can give us detailed or fine grained values. Now, we also have under scale is the discrete variable. Ito naman, these are also numbers, but they can only be whole values. Okay, whole values. So you can't have decimals or fractions here. You're counting things, not measuring actually. No. So examples here are kanang number of children. Ito nga, no, number of children, number of books you own, number of correct answers on a quiz. Okay. So if you can count it and it only makes sense in whole numbers or integers na tinatawag, then it's probably a discrete data. Okay. So under naman sa categorical variable. By the way, when we talk about categorical variables, categorical variables are about grouping things into categories or labels. No, these are usually collected through tick boxes, kagaya ng ginagawa natin sa questionnaire, multiple choice, or verbal responses. So you can't calculate actually an average from this kind of data. Under categorical variables, we also have two types. Okay. We have ordinal variables, and we also have nominal variables. First, ordinal variables, these categories have a clear order. Okay. However, in ordinal variables, the gaps between them aren't equal. No, they just tell you a rank or the position. No, just like halimbawa in an educational level. Okay, high school ba siya, college ba siya, graduate school ba siya, sa socioeconomic status, low socioeconomic status, middle, or high socioeconomic status. So they just tell you the rank or the position, but not the precise differences. When it comes to satisfaction rating, halimbawa, it doesn't tell you the value, no, associated with a satisfaction rating, but it does tell you the category to which that the one you are measuring belongs to, no, very satisfied ba, satisfied, neutral, or dissatisfied. So kaya ordinal data. Okay, so in ordinal data we just know one is higher or better than the other, but you we can't exactly say how much more or less is the difference. No. Now we also have nominal variables. These are labels or names only. There's no ranking or order involved in here. Okay. Example would be in terms of gender, we have male or female, or prefer not to say, parang ganon. So there is actually no meaningful order here. Okay. Sa civil status, single, married, widowed. Um, halimbawa, sa type of type of pet. Meron tayong dog, cat, or bird. So these categories are just different, not better or worse than each other. So there's no comparison here, but merely a qualitative data of the thing that is being described, no, or a variable that is being described. Now, when I said that ordinal data belongs to or the Likert scale that we are using um, belongs to or is under the ordinal data, you might be be confused later on as we analyze the data, no? Because later on, I'll tell you that as we analyze the data, using those questionnaires that you have, or that data that you were able to gather using those survey questionnaires, using the Likert scaling, later will fall under scale. So, atuan na siyang himay-himay yun later. But again, these are the data types, okay, as being categorized according to continuous measurement or continuous variable and categorical variables. So again, as a brief recap, if it's measured and has decimal or precise values, that is continuous. If it's counted in whole numbers, discrete yan, no? And if it's ranked or ordered but not numerical, ordinal yan, no? If it's just categories or labels with no order, so that's nominal. Okay? All right. So now that we are done with the data types, let's go a bit deeper. Okay. As we sit down, no, sa ating statistical analysis. But before we choose any statistical test, we need to pause and ask ourselves some key questions about our study. So, ito yung mga questions na if we ask ourselves with these questions, it will help us choose the appropriate data analysis tool for a quantitative research. So, first, everything starts with your research question. Okay. So, this needs to be able to be defined with specific variables in mind. So, everything starts with your research question. No? Um, our research question will help us decide, no? It will help us decide kung ano talaga yung um, ating gustong i-aim for our research. And since it is quantitative, we have to clearly define what you're trying to find out. So halimbawa, um, yung kung ang ating study is about how physical activity can improve mental health among college students. So this is the big idea behind our research. Okay? And through this main research question, it already hints us or gives us a hint as to the kind of relationship that we want to explore, or yeah, the purpose of the study, no, we are aiming to accomplish. So you have to clearly define what you're trying to find out. Okay, that's the first thing to ponder upon, no? And another is which variables or types of measurement will help answer the research question. So next we have to identify the actual pieces of data we will be working with. Okay, what are we going to measure and what type of data, no, um, are those? Okay, so halimbawa sa atong example, physical activity, um, and how it affects mental health status of college students. So physical, himay-himayin natin, no? Physical activity can be measured or should will be measured in your study in terms of how of what, no? Okay, it may be measured in minutes per week. So that could be scale or continuous. And then yung mental health score mo naman, how are you going to measure that? How are you going to get the data? So halimbawa, if you say you will be using a surveys scale, like halimbawa, DAS, so will that generate scale or continuous? Or mga ganon, no? You have to ask those kinds of questions, okay? It's very important that you know that when you are going to use uh, or when you're going to utilize quantitative analysis, you have to make sure that you will be able to generate numerical data. Okay, numerical data. Kasi nga, as we all know, we cannot do statistical analysis on data that are not numeric in nature. Okay. Now, if you are able to identify, okay, kung ano yung variables ng study ninyo, then that's well good, no? That's good kasi papasok na siya sa quanti. Kaya minsan talagang there is scrutiny na ginagawa, most especially during an outline defense or an outline or even sa title defense pa lang, because whenever a research is claiming that he or she will be doing quantitative analysis or quantitative approach, then he or she has to make sure that the variables are already accurately identified in the study. Another question is, which is the dependent or the outcome variable, and what type of variable is it? Okay. So of course, dapat alam natin, especially for um, studies like correlational, experimental, no? Um, the researcher has to identify ano yung independent or dependent variable or predictor or explanatory variables or the outcome variable. So the dependent variable again is the result or outcome you're interested in, no? Going back to our example, yung physical activity, how it impacts or how it affects mental health score, then the dependent variable there is the mental health score, of course, no? So it's a scale variable because it comes from a psychological test or Likert type scale that gives us a numerical score. Okay. Now another question is koan. Of course, which are the independent or explanatory variables? How many are there, and what type and what data types are they? Okay. So the independent variables again are the ones you think would affect the outcome. So for our example, physical activity level, um, yun yung independent or the explanatory variable in our study. And how many are there? No, titingnan natin, baka kasi may dinagdag ka pa, no, because halimbawa you are also interested apart from the physical activity, you also inserted one variable there, the sleeping, no, or um eating preference, mga ganon. Okay, so again, it has to be exactly identified kung ano yung mga variables sa study, most especially to identify kung ano yung independent tsaka dependent variable. So knowing how many independent variables you have and what types they are, this will help you decide, no, if your analysis is simple or multivariate analysis. Simple means there is only one independent variable and one dependent variable. Kung multivariate naman, kung there are many explanatory variables in the study. So another question to consider are relationships or differences between means of interest are present. Are there relationships or differences between means of interest? Okay. So this is a super important question also, no? If you're interested in relationships, you're asking, no, kung nabay connection between the two variables. That means you're likely to use tests like correlation or regression. Ganon. So that will help you understand. Or kung differences between means of interest ba yung um, involved sa study mo. Okay? If you're checking ba for differences, you're comparing group averages or group performances. So that's another thing, no? You have to consider. For example, in the same study, do male and female students differ in their mental health scores? So here you'd be using tests like t-test or uh, ANOVA to compare the means of groups. So in this case, if the gender is is the kuan, kumbaga, the means of interest in the comparison. So we will have t-test for sure, no? Kasi male and female lang. Kung iba naman, three or more groups, then what that would be ANOVA. So yeah. And another question: are there repeated measurements of the same variable for each subject? So this refers to repeated measures or within subjects designs. So ito naman, especially for this applies especially for experimental researches, no? It means verifying or checking kung meron bang repeated measures. It means, did you measure the same thing more than once for the same people? Okay? Halimbawa, um, you measured student anxiety before and after midterm week or midterm exam. So that's an example of a repeated measurement. So in that case, you'd use a paired t-test or repeated measures ANOVA. Halimbawa, no? Depending again on the groups you are trying to make comparisons with, because it considers that the same subjects were tested more than once, kaya tinatawag natin siyang repeated measure. Okay, so all these questions guide us in selecting the most appropriate statistical tool for our data. So before jumping into SPSS or Excel, or before jumping, no, into your statistical analysis, always pause and ask these questions first. Okay.